name is Rihanna McDonald with the Office of Congressman Greg Steube's Florida District 17 in collaboration with the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. I am here with Robert Gerle Sr. on June 27, 2024 at our Sarasota office. Mr. Gerle is a veteran of the United States Navy. Mr.
Yes.
Gerle, can you introduce who your parents were and where you grew up?
Yes, of course. My father's name was Oswald Caesar Gerle, Gerle, and my mother was, maiden name was Hester, but it was Nancy Ann Elizabeth Hester. And my father was born in Germany, came to this country as a year old, and my mother was born in Augusta, Georgia.
And what were their occupations?
My mother was probably working in the cotton mills in Georgia when they got married. My father was working with, he was the oldest of 5 boys, and they were building golf course greens up and down the East Coast, and they were doing some golf course work in Augusta, Georgia when he met and married my mother, and she was only 14 at the time, but that was not unusual, I guess, at that time. My father was 19. I forgot the rest of the question, though. So
That's fine, you answered it all.
Okay.
So where were you born and when?
Okay, I was born in a hospital called Metha Hospital in Port Jefferson, Long Island, and it was on an Easter Sunday, April 17th, 1938. It's a tail end of the Great Depression. So
And where was that hospital?
that was in Port Jefferson, Long Island, New York. Okay, yeah.
Did you have any siblings?
I had 3 older sisters. Yes.
And did any of them serve in the military?
No, it was before that era. Yeah.
So what was your hometown?
The hometown was a town called Patchogue, and if you spelled it with Batchogue, it sounds like Pachogi. But it was named after some Native Americans that lived out on Long Island back in the days. That's about halfway out from New York City. Long Island's about 120 miles long. Nice then, rural. Okay.
What was it like growing up?
It was pretty good. I had a really good childhood, all in all. You know, moved quite a bit, moved around quite a bit. 3 older sisters always were good. As soon as they graduated high school, they kind of left home and got married and did their own thing. So I was the baby, so I was not spoiled, of course. So.
And what schools did you attend growing up?
I'm sorry.
What schools did you attend?
Oh boy, what schools? I started off in Bay Avenue, in Patchogue, Bay Avenue Grammar School, probably with kindergarten and maybe 1st grade. But before that, at an early age, we moved to Georgia, in the Augusta area. My father was working. He was too old to go in the Army, the armed services, or rather too young at that point to go in the armed services, and later too old. Anyway, he was working. He was a very good mechanic, working at a Army camp there, Camp Upton in Augusta, Georgia. And I just remember we lived out in the country for a while, and then we moved closer into town in Augusta, Georgia. I don't remember too much of it because I was really in my early years. So I just know, one thing, they had at Christmas time or whenever it was, I bought a toy machine gun, and I was playing in the woods, and the chain gang was working on there, and I was pretending to shoot at them, and they just laughed and everything, you know. So my father went a little crazy, though, when he got home and found out about it.
Okay. And so you completed primary school.
Okay, yeah.
But tell me what happened in secondary school.
Okay, so I went to primary school, but we moved back to Patchogue, and I started in the 1st grade or whatever. I went to school there. Then we moved to a little town in middle of Long Island, Selden, and I went to kind of 4th and 5th grades there. And then we moved back to Georgia. I went to school there for 3 years for the 6th and 7th grade. And then we moved back to Patchogue, and I went to high school in Patchogue, And I did finish my first year of high school, and that's part of the story. I left home when I was 14. I was moved in my attic room with my grandmother, so I was supporting myself pretty much. And after about halfway through my sophomore year, I was 17. I decided I wanted to go in the Navy, and my dad signed for me, so I quit school and joined the Navy.
Okay. And why did you have interest in joining the military?
I don't know. Born and raised around the water, boating, swimming, fishing. I can't remember not knowing how to swim, which may sound kind of goofy, but. And I did have an uncle that was in the Navy in World War II, and he told me of crossings and convoys, and he was part of the gun crew and stuff like that. So I thought that was pretty neat. I guess so. I think that was the primary motivator, just being around the water. And also a couple of years, I was a Sea Scout at that time, so that too led to it.
Okay. And so you joined at 17. You weren't drafted, correct?
Oh, correct. It was in 1955.
Okay.
It's just, yeah.
And so what else do you remember about growing up during the 1950s and 1960s?
Boy, outside of what was going around in my little orb of living, not too much about the world, except I do remember back in Patchogue and I guess it was VJ Day at the end of World War II in 1945. There was a parade in town, and there were fireworks and everything. Excuse me. And they said, "Hey, it's the end of the war," and I still didn't have a good idea what the heck it was all about, though. So.
Okay. Did you have any work experience before entering the Navy?
Oh yeah, I did. Anything to part-time, as long as it was legal. To make money and to help support myself. I worked as a soda jerk, and then I did a good job there. And I was only like 15 maybe at the time. And the owner would let me run the place and the grill and everything when he had to go out, and I just ran the store and the cash register. I trapped muskrats when they were in season and sold the pelts to Sears and Roebuck. I worked for my uncle, picking up garbage and cutting lawn mowers and stuff. Sometimes as a carpenter's helper, just schlepping stuff, carrying wood and whatever. So I did a lot of different jobs. It crammed into about a 3-year period. I did quite a bit. But always had money and had enough money to buy a car actually before I went in the Navy.
So what or who did you leave behind when you left to serve?
Oh, my relationship with my parents was still good. I moved out because we were living in a small pre-World War II trailer out in a kind of the country. I used car lot. My dad was a mechanic, but he was also an alcoholic and could never keep a job. So I was very close to my parents, but not like the people are today. My grandmother was matriarch of the family. I missed her a lot, and that's about it. I was ready to go and start a new life. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did your family feel about you joining?
They was very stoic about most stuff, and it was, said okay. They let me do, what I wanted to do, and if it was not the right thing, I lived with the consequences. So.
What were your friends' opinions about you?
Oh, they were kind of wondering why I didn't want to stick around and finish high school. I said I hated it. I hated it, particularly math. But I found out later I had a lot of math to learn once I got in the Navy. So.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So guide us through the day you arrived at your basic training. What were your thoughts?
Oh, I would do what I was told, and I did. And I remember we all got the skinhead haircut, of course, and then issued the line. Scenes I've seen in the movie since then of guys going through the line, getting issued uniforms and everything, and most of it didn't fit at the time. But it was all new. I was a pretty good learner. I learned quick. I just obeyed orders, and I liked it. I thought boot camp was a cakewalk, actually. So.
And where was that?
In Bainbridge, Maryland. It was old World War II barracks there. So.
What is your most vivid memory about training?
I liked learning to march and the cadence count and everything like that. That was pretty good. And our drill instructor or commander, if you would call it, whatever, was a first-class machinist mate, and he was a fair guy, but he was tough. So as long as you did what you were supposed to do, and the only thing we'd get in trouble would have to what you call push a piece. We carried the old-fashioned rifles with no firing pin, of course, and you had to do upper arm push-ups with a piece, you know, and you have to, okay, give me 50. I said, okay, here we go. So.
Do you remember any of your other instructors and what they were like?
No, I do remember one. It was a first-class bosun mate, and during seamanship training or something like that, how to learn to tie up lines on a ship. You first have to get a heaving line over the light line, then you pull the heavy lines in. And to do that from the ship, it's coiled up and it has a monkey fist, a knot, and there's a way of throwing it. And to get guys' attention, he whipped that thing and hit it against a blackboard right beside his head. And he said, "That's how you throw it." And the class settled down real quick after that. So,
what was the hardest part of your training?
the boot camp?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know. I really don't. I don't think there was anything that just stuck in my mind. It was just so difficult to do. I couldn't do it. So. Or didn't want to do it.
Where and what was your first assignment after boot camp?
Okay, I guess I scored pretty high on the intake test, so I was assigned to the Navy was a technical rate, was a radio man, and it was back in those days we were learning Morse code and how to type. So I went back to after boot camp. I went back to Bainbridge, Maryland for radioman A school, which was a 3-month school, I believe, learning to type and learn Morse code, and also message handling and security and things of that nature. And I found that interesting too. I really, using Morse code, I said, "Dang, it's good." So that was I did fairly well. I had a 79% grade, which was upper third of the class, though, I guess. It wasn't in Navy, it's called an A school. A is an alpha school. And it's kind of entry-level training, basically, for specialty rates, or MOS. In the Navy, it was NEC, Navy Enlisted Classification Code, I think so.
And where was this training?
Again, that was back to Bainbridge.
Okay, same place. You didn't go very far.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so after A school, where did you go?
I went to sea duty, which was what I wanted to do. I was assigned to a ship out of home ported in San Diego, California, and the Amphibious Forces Pacific Fleet. It was a World War II class destroyer escort, but they were amidships weather decks were built up to house more housing, and we carried around either the old UDT teams or Marine recon teams, never both at the same time. That'd be a firecracker. So, and a lot of amphibious landings, training for the Marines and stuff like that. And I was a radio watch stander. We had, those days it was 4 hours on, and if it was 3 section, 4 on, 8 off. And yeah, it was tough, but you got used to it,
Okay, and so from San Diego, you went to where?
Well, I did my first enlistment. I did it entirely home ported in San Diego. From my first ship with the USS Wantuck APD 125, went to an LST, USS Polk County LST 1084. And the LSTs, if you're not familiar with them, we call them LST stood for landing ship tank. We called them a long, slow target, though. And about you could take heavy machinery, tanks and trucks and whatever, and go up on the beach and open the bow doors, put the ramp down. If you've ever seen movies, and they could drive off and do that. So that was a good ship. It was a tough old ship. I have one big story about that. We were deployed to the Far East in Japan, and we had a load of 7 Marine LVTs, amphibious tractors, we took from Camp McGill Japan down to Naha, Okinawa. They're being relocated, and we went into the port and let them go off the bow, and they just tracked it into the beach. We spent the night there, and we turned around to go back to Yokosuka, Japan, and we got caught in a typhoon. It was Typhoon Agnes in August of 1957, I think it was. I was 19 years old, and we only had 2 radio antennas, and they both got lost, and I climbed up halfway up in the mast trying to get one of them, jury rig an antenna so we could tell everybody where our position was, because captain had everybody in Kapok life jackets. We really thought we were going to lose the ship. We didn't. Fortunately, we made it back, but that was tough. And Com 7th Fleet was the commander up there, Commander 7th Fleet Forces, and we pulled back into Yokosuka, and they sent a message. They call us the Fearless Mariners. So they even, when you go into a ship, the junior ship salutes the senior ship with flag hoist or whatever, and they did it to us. They saluted us. Ooh. Get me started. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where was that? That you said you were in Japan.
Yeah, that was in. So we went from Japan down to Okinawa, which is part of Japan actually, in the Pacific, and then back up to Japan. It's all in the Pacific, and then I spent 18 months on that ship, good old ship, and then I went to another APD, USS Cook, APD 125, finished my enlistment there, was transferred for release to the Naval Station San Diego, where I was discharged. I sent my gear, my sea bag and gear home by whatever Federal Express or whatever was shipped, and had my overnight bag and a hitchhike to the East Coast. In those days, military in uniform, this was in 1959, 1960, military could get a ride just like that. So I did along the old Route 66 and back to Long Island, New York.
Okay, so at that point, what was your service contract? What was the length of time for that?
It was what they called a kiddie cruise, so it wasn't quite 4 full years. I got out on my 21st birthday, and what got back was I didn't really look for a job. I don't know, it wasn't the same. They're all saying you can't go back. The high school buddies were there, and they're in a rut and jobs they didn't like, and I liked the Navy, and I wasn't thinking about re-enlisting, but one day the recruiter called and, hey, Bob, come on down for a cup of coffee. I said, oh, all right, you got me. So I re-enlisted for 6 years, and they gave me a re-enlistment bonus. It was $1,080. I remember that to the point. And today's dollars, it would be over $11,000 or so.
Wow.
So bought a car, Ford convertible, and I had 30 days re-enlistment leave with summertime on the beach and girls and beer and car. And
You were living the life.
I was. But my 30 days were up and I was ready to go, and I was ready to go. I said, okay. So then I reported to my next ship.
Okay. And where was that?
That was up in Newport, Rhode Island. And it was not too bad a drive from Long Island up to through Connecticut to Newport. And again, that was the same class of ship, but it was World War II recommissioned to have a tricked out, really advanced radio shack and air search radar. And we were with 4 other ships on station at a time in the North Atlantic, the seaward extension of what they call the DEW line, the Defense Early Warning. That was in the early stages of the Cold War, when the United States and the then Soviet Union, USSR, were developing nuclear weapons, and the only method of delivery would be a bomber, a long-range bomber. So the Air Force built radar stations across northern Canada to detect any flight coming in from northern Europe over the Arctic reaches, the top of the globe, but you couldn't build radar stations in the ocean, so they had 4 ships on station there. And that, with the old Tri-Tail Super Connie, was geared out to have air search radar also, and they covered the gaps. And we were the seaward extension of the DEW line, Defense Early Warning. So that's what that was all about. That was arduous sea duty. The North Atlantic in the wintertime is not forgiving.
And were you deployed during that second?
Well, that
second
was,
enlistment?
you know, we didn't call them deployments. We would go out. There was four of us. We'd go to Archingia, Newfoundland, just would top off our fuel and potable water and maybe movies, the old 16 millimeter reel movies, and would go out on station and relieve the first DER, and they would go to the next station. There was four of them spaced out from Newfoundland and the North Atlantic to just close to the Azores. And they would do our stint there. It was about a week and a half or so on each station, and we'd get there and we'd go back to Newport and get rested up and everything and get ready for our next deployment. Over.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, what was the mission during that time?
To detect any aircraft coming in. We didn't know if it was by radar, if it was a Russian Bear bomber with an atomic bomb on it, or a United Airlines passenger flight. We would just report them by Morse code, very briefly, and all that went back to NORAD, and they would sort it out and had whatever means to tell is this a threat, or no, this is just a commercial flight. So.
And so, for the record, you served during the Vietnam era.
Yes, I went. From there I went to shore duty, 2 years shore duty in Quants Point, Rhode Island. From there, I wanted to get into submarine force, and a program came up, so I was able to go into submarine force, and then was plank owner, new construction on the nuclear-powered missile submarine, USS James Madison, and I did 5 patrols on that. I didn't go to Vietnam until from there I went to shore duty in Japan and Naval Communications Station in Yokosuka, Japan. And from there I went to Pearl Harbor on a nuke-fast attack submarine, USS Sargo. By then I was an E8. And we did spec ops and Vietnam stuff, and we didn't have much business for a submarine in Vietnam, but we were there multiple times.
Okay. And what were your thoughts about the Vietnam War?
Mixed, very, very mixed, because we received so much message traffic involving other units and everything, and I said, man, this is not going good. This is, I was glad when it was finally over. I didn't like the way it ended, but because we lost a lot of men there, and for what purpose? I don't know. 20/20 hindsight, yeah.
Do you remember the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Yeah, we weren't involved with it at that time. I forget where I was. I think it was in school someplace, but and I wasn't too concerned about that for whatever reason. I knew our assets were more than capable to if it came down to any kind of a shooting match, they didn't have a chance. So,
Okay. And what about the building of the Berlin Wall? What did you think about that?
I think I knew that was the way the Soviet Union worked from a little bit of news I could glean over the years. Particularly being at sea, it was really blocks of time. We were just cut off from all communications, basically, and there's no radio that would reach us or anything like that. And we copied press, so we had enough news to know what's going on with the Soviet Union and the airdrops there. Eventually, after the Berlin Wall. Other than that, we were so far removed from it. I didn't have any strong emotions about it. I didn't like it, but it was beyond my control, so I would just say la vie.
Okay. Do you remember the assassination of JFK?
Yes. Well, from the news scenes and everything, and it was a shocking surprise. Said, what the hell is our world coming to? Really. And then years later, more research, and there's a lot of so-called conspiracy theories, but I'm convinced there were 2 shooters. So somebody in politics or whatever wanted to take JFK out, and they did.
Do you remember the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr.?
Oh yeah, that too was so uncalled for. You know, particularly being in the submarine force, we didn't care about a person. I don't care their color, creed, political beliefs, religious beliefs. On a submarine, there's room for anything but a mistake, and you have to qualify. It took 9 months typically to qualify on a submarine. So when you're asleep, the guy on watch is, if something goes wrong, he's going to save your butt by saving the boat. And it doesn't make any difference what kind of person you were. So we were pretty colorblind as far as that goes, and religious-wise too, you know. So when MLK was shot, I said, that is so stupid. It is so, so stupid. I felt really bad, actually. So.
Okay. So what did you think about your fellow sailors? You know, as you said, you didn't think about race. So did you think that every sailor was just as qualified as you, and did you have confidence in the Navy?
Oh, in the submarine force, yes. I never thought about it on surface craft because it wasn't as critical. But in the submarine force, you had the highest regard. And even it doesn't mean you love everybody. There's people we just didn't get along with, and you got to be pretty thick-skinned because there's a lot of going on. But as far as, you know, I know they would, if he was in a flooded compartment, he'd shut the watertight door. Let's go on.
What did you think about the NCOs and the officers that you served with during your time in service?
That was, you know, I was very fortunate all through the Navy, really. I had good senior enlisted people as I progressed up through the ranks, you know, E1 through to E9. And either that and the junior officers, and there's some that were better than others, but never any. I only had one confrontation with a fairly senior officer. I was chief of the boat on the Sargo submarine, and the XO and I had an altercation about he wanted to do something, and I thought it would be really demotivating for the crew and everything, and I told him, if you give me a direct order, I will have to do it. But I disagree, and we discussed it, and finally the captain heard us talking, and he came out and broke it up. So. But that, otherwise, you know, and I didn't have any mentors, as long as I'm talking about that. The skipper, when I was chief of the boat, senior enlisted advisor in the surface Navy and other military, you have a very close relation with the commanding officer, and it's a lot of people don't understand it. And he was my mentor, and I didn't know it, but behind the scenes. So, yeah, good officers, really good officers.
Do you remember any of them by name?
I just lost.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I used to. Yeah, one of them was an ops officer, John Highland. Excuse me, folks. J.J. Highland, I found out later, his father was the chief of naval operations, I think, and then and we have this reunions from officers, and then it served aboard Sargo every 2 years, and a lot of these officers would show up, and the enlisted guys, and we still had the same camaraderie. So they're really, really, really good officers.
Okay. And for the record, you also served during the Cold War era. So during these eras that you served, was there ever a time that you were in direct contact with enemy forces?
No. Never, nothing I can talk about in the submarine force. I'm sorry, but it was nothing that dangerous or anything like that, or confrontational. So.
Okay. Were you injured at any point during your time in service?
Just during that Typhoon Agnes, when I went out on weather decks and the wind is blowing in. This is 160 knot winds and 60-foot seas. And one of our port LCVP, our landing craft boat, broke its cables in the davit, and had diesel fuel all over the deck, and I couldn't see it in the dark and windy and everything. And I slipped and it landed on my butt. It hurt like heck, and it's been bothering me ever since. But other than that, nothing severe. in itself related. My hearing shot from being a radioman and listening to Morse code and loud noises over the years, and all the other things that go along with an arduous life in the Navy. Even if, it's not like an Army guy humping with a 100-pound back across the street, so we know we had to do anything like that. But in our own right, we paid our dues. So. Yeah.
What kinds of friendships did you form while serving, and with whom?
Quite a few, and not so much in my younger days. One was on the Polk County, and one of my closest friends was Jack Eves. He was a helmsman. He was on the deck force, a seaman. I was in the radio shack, but he was a really good helmsman, and I think he was very important during that hurricane on the helm, steering the ship. He had a course to steer, of course, but he had to adjust the waves and everything like that and counter before they come. And I think he was the most operative part of the crew to keep that boat from being capsized, so the ship being capsized. So I kept check with him, and then other chiefs from the Sargo, the USS Sargo, and the chiefs' quarters, the E7s, 8, and 9s. So.
Did you stay in touch with anyone after you separated from
Well,
service?
Jack Eves I did, and then a bunch of the chiefs still do. I'm outliving most of them, unfortunately or unfortunately, depending how you want to look at it. But there's 2 of us left. There's 3 of us. Sam Jones is in Tennessee, and he's dying with cancer, Agent Orange-related cancer. So, but yes.
Okay. Well, while you were on the submarines and on the LSTs during your time in service, what did you do for fun? How did you pass the time?
Really, it was pretty boring, actually. A lot of the times on the small ship, the surface craft, we always had movies. The old 16-millimeter projectors with big reels, movie reels, and after the evening meal on the mess decks for the enlisted guys and the wardroom for the officers, there'd be a movie, and you'd watch a movie, play cards, and read. That's about it. Try to keep physically fit because we didn't have any gyms on ships like that, but we'd do push-ups and pull-ups on the cable runs and stuff like that. So.
Were you able to stay in touch with family and friends?
Just remotely, particularly in my younger days. I'd write to my mom and dad occasionally, and I'd hear back from my mom occasionally. Weren't very close that way. Excuse me. Darn, I'm sorry. But yeah, but no, not. It's just during my era. It just and me, we just didn't keep in touch that close while I was in the service.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about your enlistment rank, but you were also an officer.
Yeah, I was.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, I was on Sargo. I was E8, I made E9. I was E9, and then I was chief of the boat, the Cobb, as they call me, and getting close to my 20 years, and I was deciding, well, what the heck am I going to do now? I could stay, I could stay in the submarine force as a Cobb and have the same job on a different boat, and it was a good job, an exciting job, and an important job. But then my shore duty would not be very good, so I decided, well, let me see if I can apply for a chief warrant officer, and it was especially for enlisted guys, and I did. I was one of 2 selected. And my specialty was undersea warfare communications specialist, whatever the heck that means, what I was saying. But yeah, I did 3 years as a CWO, and then I got to that point, and I said, okay, now I can retire, or I can stay as a chief warrant officer and go up the path there. But my leaving, I was on the USS Canopus AS-34 is a submarine repair ship, a huge submarine tender they call it, but a huge repair ship in Holyloch, Scotland, and Rhoda, Spain, and blah, blah, blah. But leaving there, I only had 2 choices to go to Patuxent River, Maryland, to the Navy Aviation Squadron with a plane, it was called TACAMO, that had airborne backup communications for the submarine broadcasts, or to Northwest Cape, Australia, which was a huge radio transmitter site for submarine broadcast, but it was out in the desert in Australia, and Carla said, yeah, we can't bring any household goods. They give you wicker furniture and blah, blah, blah. I said, oh, the heck with this. I said, I'll go out, I'll find a job. And I said, that's why I resigned. I reverted back. They had a save pay clause when I went from E9 to Chief Warrant Officer, so I reverted back to E9 for permanently. It was about $100 a month more for retirement pay. So,
Okay. What was the proudest moment in your career?
the proudest? Oh, well, and not to do with my career so much. When our son was born, and then. Part of it was for Carla, too. She was a Navy wave. Maybe we'll hear from her at some later point. And she was very active in getting the chief of naval operations at that time aware of the shortcomings of women in the military, particularly the Navy in that case. So I was very proud of her. And I was always pretty proud of myself, without playing the ego role, but I did a lot from a kid who dropped out of high school, so, and took courses and went to college here, went to college there, so, and moved up the ranks. Do everything the hard way though. So, I loved it though.
Okay, so you've mentioned Carla a few times. Can you tell them who Carla is to you?
Oh yeah, Carla's my wife of soon to be 52 years. My second wife, I was married before for 6 years, and it didn't work out. And that, it takes two to make it and two to break it. And I had one daughter from that marriage. But she's she when I got out of the Navy and was struggling to find a job that was commensurate with the income we needed. She was working for an airline and she was the data communications in the Navy, and she went right into the airline computer department there, and reservations, all computer related, and she fought the glass ceiling in the civilian world too. So.
Okay. Do you recall the day that your service ended?
Well, it was kind of undramatic. I was on the Canopus, and we were enrolled as me over the side and have a line, and they walked through and salute me. And that was pretty good. But we were ready to go, and I did it really wrong, guys. I didn't discuss it with Carla. When I came home and I said, honey, I put my papers in. She says, well, what does that mean? I said, I'm resigning my commission. We're gonna get out of the Navy. She says, did I get to vote? Whatever she said, and I explained it. And she loved the Navy too, and she loved Spain. We were in Spain at the time. It was beautiful, but it worked out.
And so, what was your home of record?
I kept it as Patchogue for a long time, but I didn't want to go back to the East Coast. I had some job offers in Washington, D.C., pretty good, but I couldn't live in close. It's too expensive, and to commute 2 hours a day coming and going. So Carla's folks moved to Colorado many years ago after the World War II because of her dad training in the mountains for the ski troopers. So I said, oh, hell, go west, young man. So we went to Colorado. And it was a good thing to do, a good move. I liked it. So I spent there, gosh, it was 1978, 79. I guess we moved to Colorado. I went to work for Motorola Communication Electronics for the land mobile radio service management. I climbed the corporate ladder pretty quick, so making good money there, and kids, good family. We loved Colorado. It was a good choice in the long run. It really was. So.
Did you use any of your GI Bill benefits at any point?
No, at that point I didn't need them. I was making really good money and hiring guys with college degrees that I didn't have to do all the stuff that I didn't know how to do. But I was the manager and I could do that. That was really making it sounds like I'm blowing my own horn, but that was just the way I worked, I guess, you know.
Did you join any veteran organizations?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Let's
yes.
talk about that.
Yes, I was out of the Navy for quite a while. I didn't have any interest in that kind of stuff, and then after I left Motorola, I had some more time on my hands, and two other chiefs in the area that were submarine qualified chiefs. I said, "Do you want to start a submarine veterans association here?" And I said, "What the heck is that?" You know. So we got together and we did it, and we built it over the years, and then I was in the American Legion. I'm a life member of Veterans of Foreign Wars because of Vietnam. I'm a life member, Navy League, 4 or 5 different ones. I'm life members. I'm very active. I'm trying to draw back now. We started a veterans organization where we live in Florida. We live in a community called Island Walk, and Carla, myself, and 2 other, one Army veteran and another Navy veteran. We started the Veterans of Island Walk, and that's growing to, we got 60 some odd members now. So yeah, that keeps me off the streets and out of the bars. You know, I keep busy. So.
Okay. How did your military service experiences affect your life?
Oh, tremendously, in so many ways, particularly in my ability to advance based on my own ability, I guess you might say. But that helped me tremendously when I went in the civilian world. I climbed the corporate ladder. I know that's a term, but climbed the corporate ladder pretty quick, and was doing really, really well. Enjoyed it, but I didn't realize at that time that I had PTSD from this event and that stupid typhoon. But I was, people said I was spring-loaded in the pissed-off position, so I was quick-tempered, and I wasn't that type. I'm really, you know, let's work it out, let's discuss it, but there's other times of just bingo, you know.
And how did your service affect the way that you relate to others?
A lot of people didn't understand it in the civilian world. Some did that were in the military in their own right, that had gone to places and done things. But I feel more comfortable. The older I get, I feel more comfortable around veterans, and more comfortable around submarine veterans.
So during your time in service, you were in Maryland, you were in California, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Japan. Am I missing anything?
Yeah, Japan, Spain.
Spain. Tell me your favorite place.
Spain, really was, and it was different. Carla loved it. We loved it. Our son was learning Spanish. He would come home, and Carla would try to talk to him in Spanish, and he said, "Mama, you don't speak Spanish," because he had we were both working, and he had one of the first class that worked for me. His wife, he and his wife were from Puerto Rico, so they had two kids, and she was daycare for him, and she taught him quite a bit of Spanish. There he goes again. No, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
So you served from October 1955 to June 1978.
Yes.
And you were enlisted, and then you also commissioned. The highest rank that you achieved was a Chief Warrant Officer 2. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, CWO2, Chief Warrant Officer 2. I can't even pronounce it either. So.
Which service did you prefer? Did you prefer your enlistment contract, or did you prefer your commission?
I liked the commission. I really did. And it was unique, though. It was a large ship, had a large wardroom, and virtually, other than the commanding officer and the XO, they were line officers. Both were submarine qualified, and majority of the wardroom was military, Navy, or submariners, because we support vessel for submarines. So it was just we knew the business. That was really interesting. We had a good wardroom there. So.
Is there anything you would like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
Boy, I don't know. That's, you cram so much into 22 years of service and coming and going. And this is, I'm so thankful for this. I never thought about it. I know Carla's dad did this years ago for his experience in World War II.
And what's his name?
Oh, William Bill Keres, Keres. He was ski trooper in the 10th Mountain Division. And I don't know if I mentioned it before, wounded in the mountains in northern Italy.
What would you like people to know or remember from your story?
Oh, don't quit. Seriously. And it's tough times, particularly if you're undereducated until you get yourself educated a little bit more. So I made so many stupid mistakes just out of ignorance. For example, I'm born at the tail end of the Great Depression. Everybody was poor. I did not have a toothbrush until I went into the Navy. And then I didn't know how to use it. So that sounds ridiculous, but that's the way it was in those days, God.
Okay. And lastly, what message would you like to leave for future generations who will watch or hear this interview?
Be true to yourself, but also to those close to you. And I try to use the term, do it if it's legal, moral, and ethical, then it's got to be okay. And that's an oversimplification because we're not all of those things all the time. And try to be some of them most of the time, though. And be straight with people. Don't lie. And we make stories that you embellish something like that, and that's understandable. But tell it like it is. Do your best. Help those that are close to you. If you have 3 teenagers that are 2 years apart, my wife still has a little sign in her cabinet in the kitchen says, "Grandchildren are God's reward for not strangling your teenagers." So I'll leave it at that. So.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Mr. Gerle. I think I can speak on behalf of everyone who will watch this interview and listen to it. We appreciate your contribution. You retired from the Navy, and that's a big feat to achieve.
Well, thank you, and I do thank you and Congressman Steube for making the things happen. There's a lot of stories out there that need to be told. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.